Since I'm here in Northbrook, and to the right of me, to the left of me, you can't see, is H Mart, a Korean grocery store all over the United States. I go in quite a bit, or used to. But here, I'm up here, and I'm on Saunders Road, I think. And this is all the logistics. And if we get high-speed rail and all that and straighten out the rail corridors, these logistical centers can be moving unbelievable amounts of freight. So more freight trains go through Illinois than anywhere else in the United States. Freight trains. I'll look that up and double check, but I'm almost positive Illinois has more freight trains going through it than any other state. More cargo. But again, logistical centers on the right and left, and I'm waiting for these places to open and go. But again, the roadways, they built the logistical centers, but these roadways weren't built for semis. These roadways weren't built for logistics. These roadways are going to buckle under the pressure. So, and this is what I'm talking about, as you got logistics here and then logistics on this side, both sides of the road. But it was never built. See, before you build the logistics, you improve the infrastructure, not the other way around. And I'll go over this way, and on the turn right here onto Palatine/Willow Road. To the right of me is Willow Road. To the left of me, it's Palatine Road. Same road. And so Saunders is the dividing line. Saunders or Sanders. But when you build out that logistical center, you have to redo the infrastructure first before you build out the buildings. They did it back assward, and there's more buildings here, more logistical buildings here, and this is a logistical campus. As you can see, I'll turn in here, but you can see the sign right here. The logistical campus. But the thing is, these are 80,000 pound or more, depending on what type of logistics they're going to move. And you have to reinforce the bridge and the ramps. Because it's not used to this kind of load factor. Because it's perfectly placed right off of here, Wisconsin, Indiana, and so on. Right off the tollway. But they didn't reinforce this bridge. There's been no work on this bridge. There's been no work on the ramps. You have to shore up everything. Or you get on the back end, you get cracking and everything else, and it can lead to some serious conditions that could cause catastrophic conditions. So they didn't shore up anything. And that's before. It's like if the Beer Stadium comes to Arlington Heights, you got to take into account the added load factor. Now here on the right, you have this, and this logistical thing, there's going to be a lot of people that need to eat. Lots of people that need to eat. But they didn't think about that. Where are they going to get their food from? And we'll just take a little trip in here. You have a Japanese pharmaceutical firm. They can bring in all kinds of pharmaceuticals, or pharmaceuticals can be manufactured here from Estella, where my ex, Jennifer Kim, the love of my life, that I cry every time I think about losing her. But again, she's Korean. She works for a Japanese pharmaceutical firm. But the thing is, they can produce pharmaceuticals here and ship them out to Japan. So this here, pharmaceuticals, I don't know what FC is, but the whole point is they can be making the pills here. They can have a manufacturing plant here and ship them out to Japan. So they would bring in certain chemicals and that through the logistical center, and that logistical center can have a manufacturing for pharmaceuticals. For Estella, they can open up in that logistical center a pharmaceutical manufacturing, or pharmaceutical / vitamin / device, medical devices and other types of health care devices, not only for humans but also for animals. All kinds for animals. Even the zoos and Shed Aquarium and that, they need medication for their fish, for their aquatic. They take care of them. They have veterinarians that take care of them, and they need certain types of customized pharmaceuticals to take care of certain diseases with the whales or the porpoises or the dolphins. But the reason I'm over here, okay, there's one gym, and there's a Mariano's that closed down. I said it could be, maybe that could be a manufacturing, or like I said, that could be blood and blood testing and so on. I mean, anyways, there's a few possibilities, but you go in here and now you're going to bring hundreds of workers, minimum hundreds and hundreds of workers. Truly. And then you're going to get the drivers that they're going to need fuel. Do you have a truck stop here? Is there a truck stop here? No, there's no truck stop that can accommodate trucks for diesel. Zero. You have this gym, this LA Fitness. It would be overwhelmed if they had workers coming in here to work out before or after shifts. Truly. And then you have the BP over here. It doesn't have a truck stop. It doesn't have the terminal where you have a bunch of terminals that fill up with diesel. But how about a truck stop if you have the battery operator and you have Tesla trucks? They have to charge. You have to have a lot of power infrastructure for that, right? But it still needs truck ports. And then you need other things that truck drivers, like the truck stops, have showers. So when the truck driver's getting fuel in that, he can go in, take a shower, sit down in a massage chair, catch a meal, truly do some other stuff. Even he can do personal finance. They can have a business center, and the trucker can go in with his laptop and hook up the printers and that. Truly. The truck stops need business centers where they sell technology, laptops. Truckers now use tablets and laptops, and everything has barcodes, and they have scanners, and how about if a scanner goes down and so on? Truly. They need a technology center. A true with geeks like Best Buy. You know, they need to integrate Best Buy into a truck stop. They need that type of technology, because even the more sophisticated trucks, They need those geeks to help with the software, the computer systems on the trucks. So, but here you have a Chipotle, you have a Starbucks. But this is not enough. It's right across from the logistics center, but these places will be overwhelmed if that gets going. Overwhelmed. They didn't think about what they needed to make this happen. Why would you do that? Now, it's good. The CVS Minute Clinic, they can come in here, and if they feel a little down, get checked their blood and see if they got the flu. There's simple blood tests right now. They take a little bit of blood, and they analyze it and tell you if you got a cold, or if you have the flu, or if you have something else, strep throat, or, pink eye, or whatever. They can just do a quick, and it has the biomarkers and quick test right here at the Minute Clinic. So they can tell them, hey, you're coming down, take this right there. And they can prescribe it because the Minute Clinic has nurses, and nurses, I think, can prescribe drugs. Basically for the common cold and, some things along those lines. But they didn't build out any of the support centers for the truck. So you build out this logistical park, which seems to be huge, and you didn't build out any support. I'll go back down the other way and back down again. But think about this. Willow Road and Palatine Road, it's not designed for, and it has a big wheeling manufacturing center up there, and they never built this. This is why this roadway is total crap all the time. It's just the sheer weight of the trucks, it just destroys it. It was never designed for this. It's a whole different mindset if they want to build out that wheeling center, and I'll go by it, but that should be integrated to the logistical center here. That industrial park in Wheeling can grow exponentially, and I don't know what their plans for growth, but it grows by the logistical center. Parts can come into the logistical center, be sent to the manufacturing, back to the logistical center, and sent out anywhere in the world. So this is a global center for work. So they can source work from Saudi Arabia or China or anything else and have it come into the logistical and broke down and sent out to the manufacturing shops. And then from the manufacturing shops back to the logistical, then back to, air freight, or put on, down the river, the Mississippi, from the Illinois on barges, or, river freight, and river freight to the Mississippi, right to the ports in the Gulf and anywhere in the world. So look at the logistical center on both sides. I mean, and there's way more back here. So I don't understand when they do these things, they don't integrate them correctly. And so these things don't start revving up quickly because the things aren't put in place that needs to make them rev up quickly, and then you piecemeal all this stuff on the back end, and it's incredibly dampening on this ability for this to scale quickly. And Allstate right here, which is right over here, can get into insurance for trucks. And right next to Allstate, they have Old World Industries. which I don't know quite what that is. But Allstate can get into all kinds of liability insurance for logistics. Can start insuring trucks, can start insuring the loads on trucks, because Allstate owned all this land over here where the logistics center is. And so they can open up a division that focuses on insuring logistics and the vehicles that move that logistics. So they have to insure the cargo on the semi, but when the semi transfer it to a train, that's a different liability. And when it goes from a train to a ship, that's a different type of liability. It's different forms of liability, and so they have to insure the different parts. So you piecemeal together the liability policy. This leg is going to be on the semi. This leg is going to be air freight. Okay, that has a different liability. Then it's going to go to ground freight again. And so you have to know the segments of the movement to properly insure the liability of that cargo. And so Allstate, this is a big opportunity for Allstate to move into what Lloyd's of London started in, freight logistics. That's what Lloyd's of London originally started in, because Britain was an island. And so they imported incredibly. Truly, they exported some, but they imported a lot. And so you had the East Indian Company, which they do tell is right in Pirates of the Caribbean. That was a British company. The Brits had India, and they started the East Indian Company. And Lloyd's of London was based on import-export. The British originated freight insurance, logistical insurance. That was the British. They did logistical insurance, particularly for shipping. Logistics that moved on ships. That was their niche. Not air freight, not train, not semi, but ships. Any kind of sea vessels, barges, whatever. They did water logistics, insuring it, the cargo. But Allstate can get into that. Lake Michigan, the river, we move tons of barges. Allstate can get into that. So can State Farm. That's another Illinois insurance company. They're in Bloomingdale. Carol worked for them upstate. I think they're in Bloomington, Illinois. Their headquarters, State Farm. But again, that's another one. There's Farmers and that. But getting into this logistics as international trade expands, logistics, you need all types of new insurers to come in to spread the risk. And it hedges Allstate's portfolio because it insures the trucks, it insures the trains. Yeah, they have to insure the trains, not just the cargo, but also the trains, also the semis, also the planes. So Allstate can be, we have Chicago Executive Airport. All those little commuter planes have to have insurance. Just like cars have auto insurance, those planes have to have insurance. If they crash, they got to cover their liabilities. And so Allstate can be doing all these small commuter planes and that, and doing liability insurance for them, and all kinds of cargo. So there's great opportunity for these firms to expand, but you look down here, here's some Asian food. Okay. And then you have a Dunkin' Donuts, and you have a gas depot at this corner. And now you do have the courtyard, but where do semis park? What do you think they like the Super 8s and Motel is it Motel 8 and Super 8s or whatever, because they can park their semis there. Unlike here at the Courtyard in that, they don't have any parking for semis. When you're building out a logistical hub, drivers need to eat and sleep. And so usually you see a truck stop and you see a lot of motels next to the truck stops right there. And they have parking for semis. Or the truck stop allows them to sleep in the semi and they can hook up to external power. So they don't have to run their, engines. They can hook up to external power, and the ground power allows them not to run the diesel engines, and if they're afraid of refrigerated, they can run it from ground power. That way they don't have to burn the fuel and worry about killing each other with the fumes of diesel and sucking them down, and it becomes a heavily concentrated environment of CO2 and other pollutants and contaminants. But there's nothing here to support. This Courtyard doesn't do it. Now there's some hotels back there and some up here, but again, they have no truck parking. So where do the drivers, if they need to sleep, if they're not going to sleep in their cabs? And then where do they have the RV parks, really? Recreational vehicles? Well, really, you're looking at it in this way, not recreational vehicles, semis. And having semi parks where they can pull in and sleep. That's what happens with a logistical center. A lot of times they pull in and they have to wait for their load sometimes, and they have to go to sleep. They got to log so many hours. So you have an area where the semis can pull in and hook up the ground power so they can turn off the engines, and you can run it through, the engines don't have to be on. You run it through the battery or through the generator, and you can have, if you have some good mechanics, create some adaptive systems so they don't have to run the engine. So they can just run it on ground power. So again, they didn't build out the right thing for this logistical center. And I don't understand this, and this benefits Wheeling, and I think this is either Glenview or Northbrook on the other side. So, or Glencoe, I forget what pairs up right here next to Wheeling. I think it's Northbrook. That's where Julie Cho used to live, in Northbrook, before she moved to Evanston. Anyways, another girl I love. But that being said, I think this is Northbrook. But nothing's integrated. And then how are you integrating Chicago Executive Airport for small logistics? Truly, small package logistics. You can move a lot of small packages. So Chicago Executive Airport can be a logistical hub for small packages. You can move a lot. Mail is small packages, leathers. So those planes can carry 1,000 pounds, 2,000 pounds of mail. All those, 35 or whatever cent stamps. And they get a piece of that. They fly it in via airmail. Truly, but it's small packages. And then you condense the small loads and put it into a semi, and you can do ground After it drops the plane, then you can, and then you put it into the semi to drop the loads in different other places. But again, who's planning this? I mean, when I'm looking at this stuff, I'm very confused at what they're doing. They've prepared nothing, and they built those centers. That's great. It looks beautiful. But again, none of this other is prepared for this. So they haven't upgraded this. They put in some new pavement. Now this pavement is like shit they put in. Why? It's all buckling and everything. They just redid this because of the load factors. They have a lot of semi-traffic here, and they didn't do the pavement right. The asphalt is a different design when you're designing it for even heavier loads. So they didn't design it correctly, and so they just did it a year or so ago, and it's all buckled to crap. And so I'm going up here, the Chicago Executive Airport. Now you get support. Now McDonald's can do meals to go for the planes. There's McDonald's, Jimmy John's, and Dunkin' Donuts. And they can have delivery just to the airport. Truly. All these right here, the McDonald's and everything that's over here, can work. And then people fly in from Chicago Executive, Enterprise rental cars right here. So they fly in, and the rental car can meet them right in the terminal. They don't have to come over here. The agent takes the car, picks them up, brings them back if they need to do any paperwork. But again, Enterprise is right here and should be doing a killer business based on people coming in and out of the airport. But again, this could be thriving in small package logistics, feeding off the logistical center, but also moving, smaller loads of parts, like from Rockford down to here. There's Caterpillar and everything else in Rockford. Well, they can move small batches of parts from Waltz Brothers, as an example, flying it out to Caterpillar, and they have a manufacturing facility up in right outside of I forget what it's called, but I've been there, and it's they manufacture a lot of parts. They outsource a lot, but they also have in-house, and their in-house, the facilities are impeccably clean. I was impressed. It was very clean, very organized. It seemed like a nice facility to work in. The Caterpillar facility. But we have John Deere and all this right here. And we have Komatsu, which is right off of 90. It's another heavy equipment manufacturer. It's a Japanese firm, but it's located right here in Chicago, Komatsu. And they make all kinds of, construction equipment. So again, it's just not John Deere and Caterpillar. We have Komatsu and many others that are located here. So we have domestic and international firms that are in the farming. They produce farming, they produce equipment, they produce construction equipment, and they produce all kinds of different forms of equipment that are located here. So, it doesn't seem that they have an idea of what's around them and how they integrate it. And then you have National Lewis up here. Well, what type of education are you going to offer? because you should be offering things that advanced education to people that work in an industrial park. That's what I would be offering. I would focus my education here for the types of businesses around me. We have Grace Church, an Asian church right here. And then there's a big Korean church attached to the Chicago Executive Airport as well. So I think Grace is Chinese. Could be. Usually they use that name, but it could be Korean. But anyways, you have it here, and again, there's no integration, and I'll just go into the industrial park. This is all the industrial park right here, and I'll go straight up to the corner. But how are they integrating the industrial park with the logistics center, with the Chicago Executive Airport? Surely, how are they integrating? Because if the industrial park gets more business that is driven through planes that drive in the logistical components, and they could be, doing different operations on it, picking them up from Rockford, flying them down here, taking them over there to do grinding or finishing or turning, and then putting them back on, sending them up to Rockford, then dropping them off at Caterpillar. So again, they're supposed to be, so the airport helps the industrial park helps the airport and the logistics center, and they work together as one big ecosystem, or as the Japanese say, a kamatsu, or I think it is, where all these businesses are doing their own thing, but they also work together, and they have shared marketing, and they try to drive business in because they each get a piece of that business. So they're doing their own thing, but they also know that when they drive business in, they can give it over to their strategic partners for certain operations. So they compete in one way, but work together in another way. And so it's a balancing act. So you have here Handyfoil, where I worked, and they make stuff for Walmart. Well, Walmart's in China. I don't know if Walmart's in South Korea. I know Walmart's trying to get into Europe. I don't know if they're in Europe now. But they're expanding globally, and Handyfoil makes all this stuff for them and sends it out to Walmarts all over the place. So this is the Pewaukee Business Center. And they have Vivian. We're in it for life. I don't know what they are, but here, I'll go up and buy Waltz Brothers. This is Waltz Drive. So you can see it right here, I think. Let me get it right. Maybe up there. You can't quite see it, but I think you see it right there. There you go. Waltz Drive. And the reason is, and let me put it up back here. The reason is they were one of the first here in the industrial park. And they owned all this land around them that they sold off, that they should have never sold off. But they owned all this land where all these other buildings were built too. Waltz Brothers could have expanded into this land. But here's Waltz Brothers. So you can see the sign. And then under it, it says Precision Machining and Grinding 10 West Waltz Drive, Wheeling, Illinois, 60090, I think. 60090. But anyways, you have it here, and then you have these other businesses. And so, and they do business. This is 5 Waltz Drive and so on. And again, they used to own all this land. And so they were one of the first tenants here in the industrial park in Wheeling. They moved up here at the end of my 7th grade, beginning of my 8th grade. That's when I moved up here. And so that goes back, 40 something years ago. So they were one of the first tenants here in the industrial park. But again, I don't understand how they're... Let's go this way. I don't understand how they're integrating this. That's my thing. They need to integrate this for it to be a functioning system. Even if they're independent businesses, that's what Chamber of Commerce do. They can have a Wheeling Industrial Park Chamber of Commerce. Surely, Wheeling Industrial Park, just for the industrial park, Chamber of Commerce. Separate from the Wheeling Chamber of Commerce. It doesn't mean they're not part of the Wheeling Chamber of Commerce, but this is for people in the industrial park. And this way, they can source business back and forth with each other. And they have the hotel laundry place right over here. So you'll see it on the left side over here. But you won't see it well. But they do, for all these small hotels and that, they do all their laundry. So it's Genie Corp, I think. And let's see, Dream World. So I think that was them. Maybe it changed. But they used to do for the small hotels and motels, they did all their sheets and everything. They would truck them in and do all their, clean the sheets, fold them, press them, fold them, and so on. So, anyways, and then we have Alcoa. Now, Handy Foil uses aluminum, as I said before. They do all the aluminum stuff for Walmart. Well, what do you think Alcoa does? It's right here. Alcoa is big into aluminum. And so Handy Foil and Alcoa naturally work together. I don't know if they do, but they naturally should be talking to each other, because Alcoa is huge into aluminum, and Handy Foil produces incredible amount of aluminum products for Walmart. And as Walmart expands, so does Handy Foil. And the Jiffy Pop, if they had the handle, they worked it out right. People got burned by the handle, but you used to cook it on your stovetop, Jiffy popcorn, and it was an aluminum, and you just put it on, instead of a pot, you just put the Jiffy Pop, and it had a handle, and you set it right on top of the stove. And the Jiffy Pop is good for cooking at camping sites. If you want to make popcorn, you can put the Jiffy Pop on top of the campfire. Truly, now you have to have a place for it, but you can also make Jiffy Pop on top of a barbecue. A barbecue grill, you can put the Jiffy Pop on top of it. It's an aluminum container, and the top rises on the aluminum container. There's a sheet you take off, a cardboard, and I think Jiffy Pop still has a huge place in the world. But the thing is, the handle was made out of aluminum, and the bottom would get hot and it transferred to the handle. And if you weren't wearing gloves, people got burned. And they had so many suits for people getting burned that basically it really crushed their product. They needed to, solve the problem of the heat transfer to the handle. So this is Alcoa right here. And so they're in aluminum, and Jiffy Pop goes into an aluminum container. And we make a lot of corn here in Illinois. And I'll just keep on going down this road. But we make a lot of corn. Now, we make a lot of feed corn, but we also make a lot of human corn, too. And Jiffy Pop, I used to use it all the time as a kid, and I know you got to wear the gloves because I've touched that handle, and it gets unbelievably hot. So a lot of things had good ideas, but what they didn't do, it's just poor execution. When they had a problem, they didn't adapt. I'm watching this thing on Swin Bicycles, and it's the same thing. They ran into these issues, and they failed to adapt. And Swin went under. I remember being a kid, Swin Bicycles was, the shit. But then it lost to Track and Giant and others. And I have a lot of my friends that went into the mountain biking business. But they didn't adapt and get big into the mountain biking business. Mountain bikes grew rapidly. And they didn't get into the mountain biking business. They didn't adapt correctly, and they lost out. And so I was watching that on YouTube. So this huge Chicago corporation failed to adapt correctly. And they said the owner was a family member who took over, and he wasn't into bicycles. But getting said that, who can produce bicycles? Swin was producing motorcycles. Well, BMW produces what? Motorcycles. They can produce bicycles. Honda produces motorcycles. They can produce bicycles. Kawasaki produces motorcycles. They can produce bicycles. As they said, the stuff they were doing for bicycles fits right into motorcycles. Well, motorcycles fit into bicycles. So they can diversify into bicycles. It would be cool, a BMW bicycle. You buy a BMW and you buy a bicycle with it to go mountain biking. A BMW mountain bike. It would have prestige, Honda mountain bike, Acura mountain bike, Honda's luxury line. But the thing is, you don't really hear much about Acura as much. They, they're understated, but when they first came out, we bought Acuras. Lair did. We got an Integra and a Legend, was it, I think? But he bought 2 Acuras when they first came out. And so, again, they just didn't do as well as their counterparts. But, again, they have great potential. So, again, it's interesting on how these things are going. But we have Chevy. I'm driving a Chevy. And, so Chevy and trucks. So lots of work trucks and Chevy. That was the old commercial. Chevy has 2 performance cars. They have the Chevy Corvette and the Chevy Camaro. So they're into trucks and performance cars. Not the same buyers. It is very, how do you say, a dichotomy that people going in, they're in the trucks, they're not looking for a Corvette. So it tends to get harder to, but I guess Chevy has SUVs, and usually if you're buying a truck, you probably are traditional and have a family, and so you would purchase an SUV. So Chevy has SUVs, so that fits into the truck buyer more than the sports car. But anyways, and this area could be amazingly thriving, unbelievably thriving, but the townships, they don't communicate and work together well. How often does the mayor of Buffalo Grove meet with the mayor of Wheeling, who meets with the mayor of Palatine, and talk about how we're going to build out our communities? Truly, how they're going to build out their communities, how they're going to work together for a brighter future. Because they have to. They're doing their own thing within, but also they have to meet and talk between the communities and figure out how they're working together to bring projects. So the project can be in Wheeling, the logistical park, but also you're going to bring in people and they're going to live here, up here on the northwest side. And you have Buffalo Grove High School, which is down, and then you have Wheeling High School, which is over here. But they have to figure out, this thing. They're talking about, okay, we're doing this, we're doing that. How does it affect each other? And how does it benefit the area overall? So they do it with not trying to detract from each other, but trying to do things that end up mutually benefiting each other, rising together. So in some ways you're competing, but that's more of on the minor side. More ways you're working together for the benefit of the community. So you're competing against, Chicago and larger pockets, Naperville and so on. Or Aurora might be a bigger pocket. I don't know. So, again, they have to work together. So how many people from Buffalo Grove work in Wheeling in the industrial park? Truly. How many people that work in all the pharmaceutical companies, which I work for here in Buffalo Grove, and there's quite a few. They make pharmaceutical devices and they make pharmaceuticals. And how many of them live up this way as well? So there's a great ability to build out this area and make it incredibly prosperous. But again, I don't know how much they talk to each other, the mayor and the boards, to, figure out how they can strategically move forward to go after certain employers. So if they don't want to go to Buffalo Grove, maybe Palatine. If not Palatine, Wheeling. If not Wheeling, Northbrook. Truly, how do they work together? So sometimes they might say, well, you don't quite fit our dimensions, but, what we're looking for, but we do have partners around us, several other townships, and if you know their demographics. You might be getting it for you, but you can give it to them, and when they're losing it, they might be able to steer it into your community. So don't let it go. See if you can place it somewhere else within the state. Truly, somewhere else around you, so you benefit indirectly. That's the best. So say if it wasn't going to Buffalo Grove and it went into Wheeling, well, indirectly, they're going to get crossover business into Buffalo Grove. So, again, figuring out how they're going to do this, and if not, maybe somewhere else within the state. Maybe downstate to Carbondale might be a better location for them. You know what they say, well, you're not winning the bid for this. Say you're going after, I don't know, a Kawasaki plant. And they're like, well, that area just doesn't, or that land value doesn't do it for us. Well, okay. Well, how about if you look at downstate Carbondale? And land per square foot is cheaper. And you still right there by Southern Illinois University, so you have a base of high-skilled individuals that can work in, and you have, cheaper land value. You still flow in nicely into logistics, highway systems, and other logistical transportation systems. So does that work better for you? So sometimes you might not end up with it, but you could steer it somewhere else within the state or within the Midwest. Sometimes it might not be the state at all that works, and you go to Wisconsin or Iowa or Indiana. So that's the Midwestern Governors Association. I would assume there's a Midwestern Mayors Association. If there isn't, they should create one. But again, if they're doing it right, this area is thriving beyond belief. But I don't know. I'll post this on YouTube.